It began as one of those evenings you expect to be simple, unremarkable, the kind you forget about by the following morning. I had been looking forward to dinner after a long day, just a quiet table, decent food, and the small comfort of not having to wash the dishes afterward. The restaurant was one I had visited once before, tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop, the kind of place that relied more on convenience than charm. Still, the food had been passable, and that was enough for me. The trouble began the moment the server appeared. She walked up to the table as if I were an intrusion rather than a guest, her pen clicking impatiently before I even spoke. I ordered a drink, which she forgot. I asked a question about the menu, and she answered with the kind of sigh you'd expect from someone asked to solve a riddle. Every interaction was laced with disdain, each word edged with sarcasm, as though my presence there was some personal insult to her. I tried to ignore it at first, telling myself she might be having a bad night, but the experience worsened with every step. The food arrived cold. I politely pointed it out, only to be told that was how the chef served it. The bread I requested never came. Refills were ignored. And when I finally asked for the check, she dropped it on the table with such force that the glasses rattled. No apology, no courtesy, not even the most minimal acknowledgement of the awful service. On the way home, anger tightened in my chest. It wasn't just the inconvenience, though the meal had been spoiled. It was the disrespect. I had sat there quietly, never raised my voice, never asked for more than what I had paid for. And in return, I was treated like an annoyance. That kind of arrogance, it didn't sit well with me. I knew I couldn't just let it pass. The next day, I started small. I left a detailed review online. Not just a rant, but a carefully crafted piece of writing that laid out the entire sequence: the forgotten drink, the cold food, the dismissive attitude. I made sure it was measured, almost clinical in tone, but vivid enough to leave no doubt about what I had experienced. Within hours, the review had drawn attention, other diners chiming in with stories of their own, a pattern emerging. I hadn't been the first. But I didn't stop there. I returned to the restaurant a week later, not as a guest, but as a quiet observer. I took a seat near the window with a notebook and ordered only a coffee. I watched the way the server worked, the way she rolled her eyes at one customer, dismissed another's questions, walked past tables as if they weren't there. It was almost astonishing how consistent she was, how many people she managed to alienate in a single evening. I wrote it all down. By the third visit, I had gathered enough detail to make something stronger. I compiled the notes into a letter, not just to the manager, but to the owner of the restaurant chain. It wasn't vindictive. It was methodical, outlining not only the poor service, but the potential cost in reputation and lost business. I included quotes from the reviews I had seen online, weaving them together into something impossible to ignore. 2 weeks later, I returned one last time. The server was gone. A new staff member greeted me, warm and attentive, as if to erase the memory of what had come before. The food was better, the atmosphere lighter. My revenge hadn't been loud or messy, but it had been effective. I hadn't raised my voice or caused a scene. I had simply held up a mirror to the truth of her behavior, and that truth had undone her. As I left the restaurant that night, I felt a calm satisfaction. Revenge didn't have to be dramatic. Sometimes, it was as simple as reclaiming your dignity, making sure you weren't forgotten or dismissed. And in that small, quiet way, I had won. The satisfaction of seeing her gone should have been enough, but I found that the bitterness still lingered. It wasn't just about one rude server. It was about how powerless I had felt in the moment, sitting there at that table while she mocked me with her indifference. That kind of helplessness doesn't just dissolve when someone is fired. It festers until you find a way to truly even the scales. I started to dig. Not because I needed to, but because curiosity can be its own form of hunger. A name here, a detail there. I had remembered the way she wore her name tag, the unusual spelling. It didn't take long to connect the dots online. Social media is a window people leave wide open without realizing it, and hers was no exception. There she was, smiling in pictures with friends, posting complaints about annoying customers, bragging about walking out on shifts early, laughing at the idea of ever getting caught. Each post felt like fuel, stoking the fire I thought I had already put out. At first, I just watched. Then I started leaving subtle comments on her public posts, nothing cruel, nothing direct, just reminders that people noticed more than she realized. A simple, interesting story. Hope your boss doesn't see this. Beneath one of her rants about lying to a customer. Another time, I replied to a photo of her wearing the restaurant uniform with, "Better enjoy it while it lasts." She didn't respond, but I could tell from the sudden tightening of privacy settings that she had seen them. Still, it wasn't enough. Petty, maybe, but I wanted her to feel the way she had made me feel. Powerless, scrutinized, judged. So I waited. Patience is its own kind of weapon. A month later, she started working at another restaurant across town. A diner, small and struggling, the kind of place where reputation was everything. I knew because she announced it online, proud of her fresh start. I visited. Not once, but 3 times, each time pretending to be nothing more than another face among the crowd. She didn't recognize me. Why would she? To her, I had been just another customer, insignificant and forgettable. But I remembered her every expression, every word, every roll of the eyes. And as I sat there, I observed again, the same habits, the same sharp tone when she thought no one important was listening. Different uniform, same attitude. I wrote another review. Not under my name this time, but under a different one, crafted carefully, so it would blend with the voices of other customers. Then another a week later. And another. Each review highlighted the same things I'd seen before, her sarcasm, her indifference, her disdain for the very people who paid for the food. I didn't need to exaggerate. The truth was damning enough. Soon the pattern spread again. Others chimed in, piling on. I could almost imagine her confusion as the complaints multiplied, as the weight of her own behavior bore down on her. Within 2 months, her smiling photos in the diner uniform vanished from her profile, replaced with vague complaints about haters and toxic workplaces. She had lost that job too. And still, the bitterness wasn't fully gone. I realized then that revenge isn't clean. It doesn't just remove the thorn. It leaves a scar. What I felt wasn't triumph, but something quieter, more unsettling. I had won, yes, but in winning I had crossed into a part of myself I hadn't seen before. The kind that doesn't forgive easily, the kind that waits and watches and plans. When I walked past that old restaurant again, the one where it had all started, I caught myself staring at the door longer than I should have. The new staff smiled warmly at a couple going inside, the air of hospitality restored. They had no idea of the small war that had played out here, no trace of the person who had once made it unbearable. Only I carried that memory, and the knowledge that I had not only taken back my dignity, but had ensured she could no longer strip it from someone else. Revenge, I realized, is rarely about balance. It's about memory. Hers, mine, and the kind that lingers long after the meal is over. Even after she disappeared from that second job, I couldn't stop thinking about her. I told myself it was finished, that I had gotten what I wanted, but the truth was that I had begun to enjoy the process. It wasn't just about the revenge anymore, it was about the control. In the restaurant that night, she had all the power. She decided when my drink came, how my food was served, whether my evening would be ruined. Now the balance had shifted, and I found myself reluctant to let go of that feeling. I kept checking her online presence. Slowly, I saw the cracks forming. Posts grew bitter, desperate. She raged about how customers lie for free food, how management never has your back, how people just don't appreciate hard work. The irony didn't escape me. She had built her world on dismissing others, and now she was being dismissed in turn. But there was something more, an air of paranoia. She hinted that people were out to get her, that she couldn't catch a break. She wasn't wrong. It would have been easy to walk away then, to let her spiral down on her own. But by that point, walking away felt impossible. I wanted her to understand, fully, that every careless word and every cruel gesture had consequences. So, I sharpened the knife in ways she couldn't see. I created an anonymous account and began posting in local restaurant forums, weaving stories about her. Some true, some merely colored by suggestion. I didn't have to fabricate much. Her reputation had already been poisoned by her own behavior. I simply nudged it further along, hinting at unreliability, theft, a temper that flared in the wrong moments. I knew managers and owners sometimes skimmed these forums, looking for red flags before hiring. I wanted her name to become one. Weeks later, a post of hers confirmed it. She complained that no one was calling her back, that she couldn't even land an interview anymore. She laughed it off online, but I could almost see the panic behind the words. For someone like her, someone who thrived on attention, on a sense of control, this was worse than losing any single job. This was invisibility. Still, something gnawed at me. I should have felt satisfied. Instead, I felt restless, pacing in my mind, asking myself what line I had crossed and whether I cared. Revenge has a way of changing shape. It starts as justice and becomes something darker, something that feeds on itself. And as I thought back to that night in the restaurant, the clatter of the check hitting the table, the smirk on her face, I realized that no matter how far I pushed it, a part of me would always remember that helpless sting. One evening, months later, I passed by a fast food chain and, through the window, I saw her. No uniform, no air of authority, just a customer in line, shoulders slumped, tapping her phone with the kind of distracted exhaustion that comes from having nowhere else to be. She didn't notice me, of course. She didn't remember me at all. But I stood there for a long time, watching her, knowing that she had finally been reduced to the very thing she despised, someone ordinary, someone powerless. I should have felt triumph. Instead, I felt something closer to silence, a hollow echo inside me. My revenge was complete, more thorough than I had ever planned, but it left me wondering whether I had punished her, or whether I had been punishing something in myself all along. The thought followed me home, heavy and unshakable. Sometimes revenge doesn't end when you've won. Sometimes it ends when you no longer recognize the person carrying it out.